The Smithsonian has collected thousands of giant skeletons and tucked them away from the public. The Egyptian government is notorious for defending their official story of the Giza pyramids. And the Chinese government has been burying several ancient pyramids beneath trees. Hiding our mysterious past and anything that challenges the official historical narrative has been going on for well over a century. My Lunch Break on YouTube has been showing how the construction of several dams have knowingly submerged numerous ancient ruins and archaeological sites around the world. The Ilisu Dam in Turkey submerged the ancient city of Hasankeyf, which dates back 12,000 years and was a cultural crossroads of Mesopotamian, Byzantine, and Ottoman civilizations. This submersion also displaced 80,000 people when it buried their homes beneath the water. The Birasik Dam in Turkey submerged Zeugma, a major Roman and Hellenistic trading center, including several unexcavated areas. The Kaban Dam in Turkey submerged Norsun Tepe, a 40-level Bronze Age settlement that was continuously occupied from 5000 to 1000 BCE. It was barely explored before being submerged in water. In Egypt, the Aswan dams submerged over 1,000 sites, the Temple of Isis, the city of Aniba, and several other ancient monuments are now beneath over 2,000 square miles of water in Lake Nasser, one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. The face of the Abu Simbel temple was cut into pieces and reassembled 65 meters above its original footprint, while the actual temple was submerged beneath the waters. Philae, a sacred site known as the Pearl of Egypt, dating back to 300 BCE, was submerged, as were several other ancient temples, villages, and cemeteries. Approximately 50,000 Nubians were displaced when their homes were buried beneath the water. In China, the Three Gorges Dam and the Qiandao Lake Dam have submerged over 1,300 sites, including a 1,400-year-old city from the Han Dynasty. Well-preserved temples, roads, and houses were buried beneath 40 meters of water. In India, the Panchet Dam submerged the village of Telkupi and its surrounding area, including a number of temples. These temples were part of a group of ancient structures that had been located in the village for centuries, with some dating back to the 1st century AD. The Belo Monte Dam in Brazil submerged several ancient and unexcavated archaeological sites. The Mosul Dam in Iraq submerged ancient Sumerian and Babylonian ruins. And the Mornos Dam in Greece submerged the ancient city of Callio, with temples and fortifications from the classical Greek period. These submerged sites are controlled not just by local governments, but by the United States and the United Nations. An archaeologist from Boston University, Ricardo J. Alia, explained how UNESCO and the United States have kept archaeologists from exploring these submerged sites by conjuring the law of the sea, underwater cultural heritage, and exclusive economic zones. Laws have been created that allow for salvage and theft, but restrict archaeologist access. Greg Reese reporting.
Hi, Steve here. How many people believe fake news? Understanding that our history of this world is constantly and deliberately being erased and altered, we have to ask the most basic question of why. Why are they doing this? Why would men in governments and authority deliberately hide entire peoples and civilizations from our view? Could it be that they, the real rulers and people with the money and control of this world system, are actually serving the devil and his agenda and are ordered to cover up the facts of past generations to keep us from knowing many things?
In 1819, a group of soldiers were digging a pit in Lompoc Rancho, California, to search for a powder magazine. Working their way through layers of hard, compact gravel, the soldiers found something out of place: a 12-foot sarcophagus. While this in itself was already strange on its own, something even more shocking was hidden inside it: a skeleton of a giant human, measuring around 12 feet tall as well, or about 5 meters. In the same area, the soldiers found artifacts that may have been buried along with this giant skeleton: weaponry, semi-precious minerals, and shells on which strange symbols were engraved. To top it off, they found that the skull had 2 rows of upper and lower teeth. Not knowing what to do, the soldiers approached a local Native American tribe for assistance. Declaring it to be a remnant of a deity, the weary tribe asked them to bury the remains again and never to disturb it once more. True enough, once the authorities caught wind of the situation, they indeed reinterred the bones secretly. Nothing was heard of about it ever since. This story was told by a woman in 1862. Her husband was one of the soldiers who unearthed the strange sarcophagus with the giant skeleton. This area has since then been turned into a military facility. Nowadays, it hosts the Vandenberg Space Force Base. The 1819 story was just one of the many accounts of the supposed giant skeleton discoveries all across the United States. Giant stories are abound in many mythologies and cultures around the world. Wherever you go, there's almost always a tale about a giant or giants, larger or taller than normal humanoids, with immense strength and power. In these stories, they usually play antagonistic roles, hostile and even openly violent to the humans they encounter. From Goliath of the Bible to Ymir of Norse and to the Gigantes of the Greece, there's no shortage of these larger-than-life stories. The Americas is also no stranger to stories of gigantic humans. From Paul Bunyan to the Paiute legends of red-haired giants, there is no shortage of giant stories, each as bizarre as the other. Nowadays, we look back at these stories as nothing more than myths and legends. After all, it's hard to imagine that such creatures of colossal size once roamed the earth. There is also no solid and verifiable proof that they did. Archaeological findings of gigantic proportions. The mystery of America's giant skeletons. Since the early 1800s, sightings of giant skeletons have popped up every now and then all over the country, with some even earning a space in newspapers. Dozens of articles regarding giant skeletons were in newspaper archives, town history records, and journals of important people. Some of them you can even find online. In just a span of 200 years, over 1,000 reports of skeletons with a height measuring at least 7 foot or 2 meters up to 18 feet or 5.4 meters tall have been found. As you can see in this map, some states in the country have higher concentrations of giant skeleton accounts than others, with Ohio in the lead. An anonymous internet user also collected newspaper clippings and reports of supposed giant skeletons in a publicly available spreadsheet. Based on their collected data, here's a chart that shows the states and some countries with the most gigantic skeletal sightings. You can check out the links to this spreadsheet on the map in the video's description. While most of these have been chalked up to hoax, exaggerations, or misidentifications, others can't be so easily dismissed. Among these are the few accounts that sit above the rest, some from its believability, while others for its eerie similarity to old Native American legends. Then there are those that combine both. A 1947 newspaper also reported a strange account of a retired Ohio physician by the name of Dr. F. Bruce Russell. According to the article, Dr. Russell, alongside his colleague Dr. Daniel S. Bovee, was prospecting in an area in Death Valley, California, to look for mining opportunities in 1931, when he fell into an underground cave when the ground beneath him gave way. What he stumbled upon in that place was something he never would have imagined finding. Because underneath that seemingly ordinary area was a complex network of catacombs and tunnels. Bovia joined Russell in exploring the caverns, only to find even more mysterious artifacts, bones of extinct animals, and mummified remains of giants measuring 8 to 9 feet tall. Naturally, when Russell and Bovie told this story to others, nobody believed them. Russell, however, was persistent at first and even formed a corporation with the goal of exploring the said cavern network even further and profiting all from it. Unfortunately, they never found it again. But the story doesn't end there. Only a short while after that, Russell disappeared. His car and suitcase was found abandoned in a far-flung area in Death Valley. Meanwhile, his companion Bovie wasn't heard of since the incident, as if he vanished into thin air. Russell and Bovie weren't even the only ones to tell such a tale. In the 1920s, there was also another prospector, only known as White, and fell into a cavern and discovered evidence of civilization in the place. Later on, a Paiute native named Tom Wilson was fascinated by White's tale as it's similar to his grandfather's story. Wilson accompanied White to find the mysterious caverns, but they weren't able to locate it anymore. A book published in 1932 titled Death Valley Men by a prospector named Bork Lee also recounted the same story. Like the others, the men who visited the underground city vanished. Interestingly, 577 miles away from Death Valley, a similar story happened in 1904 to a British prospector only known as J.C. Brown. Like Russell, Bovie, White, and Wilson's grandfather, J.C. Brown accidentally discovered a cave where he found not only treasures and artifacts, but also mummies of giants measuring up to 10 feet or 3 meters tall. Strangely, Brown also vanished on the day he and an exploration team was about to set out to return to the area. Stories of underground cities and giants actually have their roots in Native American legends. The Paiute people even have a legend about a chief who, grieving for the death of his beloved wife, wandered to the Death Valley and stumbled upon an underground city called Shinuav. While this tale from the Paiute people didn't have giants on the surface, another one has a more direct mention of beings who are larger than normal humans. According to a story told to mining engineer John T. Reed in 1886, the Paiute people once found a war against a tribe they called the Siteka. The Siteka, or the Sia, are a tribe of red-haired, cannibalistic giants who terrorized the area. The Paiute people eventually emerged victorious and drove them away to a cave, barring its entrance to prevent the giants' escape. That place is known as the Lovelock Cave. A link to a detailed video about the giants of the Lovelock Cave can be found in the description. Unlike our previous stories, though, there might be some veracity to the story of the Siteka people. You see, in 1911, two Bat-Guano miners, David Pogg and James Hart, stumbled upon the remains of the tribe. Beneath the layer of Bat-Guano measuring 3 to 6 feet were thousands of artifacts and remains that were clearly left there by a sizable settlement. One sandal was even estimated to be 10,000 years old, which was even older than the recognized most ancient civilizations in the world. And while there is unfortunately a scant evidence that the tribe who used to live there were actually giants, one of the remains discovered in 1911 was that of a 6'6" tall human. Not exactly a giant, but a little taller than average. However, there was a catch. Not all artifacts or remains of the cave were preserved. The problem started when during the first exploration of the miners, only the objects that deemed interesting were saved. So as misfortune would have it, long before any systematized digging was done, there may have been many valuable artifacts that were irreversibly damaged and forever lost to time. It turns out that cases similar to this isn't exactly uncommon. A lot of reported discoveries of giant skeletons all across the country mysteriously ran into an issue and were declared to be hoax. Granted that many might have been a hoax, there are others that make you question whether there's a deliberate cover-up. Mounds and giants. Mounds are a sizable pile of earth artificially constructed as either a burial or ceremonial site. A mysterious earthwork that confounded the ordinary folks and archaeologists alike, mounds have existed in North America for thousands of years. According to the estimates, there were 1 million mounds all over the United States, but only 100,000 of them remain nowadays. Even in the 1800s, there were many people who believed that a race of giants have actually built these mounds. Among these was Abraham Lincoln, who famously wrote, "But still there is more. It calls up the indefinite past. When Columbus first sought this continent, when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the hand of his Maker, then as now, Niagara was a roaring here. The eyes of the species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. Contemporary with the whole race of men, and older than the first man, Niagara is strong and fresh today as 10,000 years ago. The mammoth and mastodon now seem long dead, that fragments of their monstrous bones alone testify that they ever lived, have gazed on Niagara, in that long, long time, never still for a single moment, never dried, never froze, never slept, never rested." Interestingly, it was also during this time the accounts of giant skeleton discoveries were reported in various newspapers. More intriguingly, 2 of them came from the New York Times. According to these 2 articles dating back 1886 and 1897, skeletons attributed to a giant human-like creature were found in Cartersville, Georgia, and Wisconsin, respectively. The Georgia skeleton measured 14 feet, or 4.3 meters, while the Wisconsin one was around 9 feet, or 2.7 meters. While you can still read these newspaper articles on the New York Times website, strangely, there were no updates since what happened to the 2 reported giant skeletons. It was as if the newspaper mentioned it once, then decided not to talk about it anymore. One of the most fascinating mound sites in the country, the Great Serpent Mound, also has its share of giant skeleton story. In the 1890s, Professor Frederick Ward Putnam found 6-foot-tall skeletons near the area. While that's not gigantic by any means, another researcher named Jeffrey Wilson rediscovered and photographed a 7-foot skeleton. Weirdly enough, the said skeleton had its lower leg and feet missing, which led some to speculate that it may have been taller than that. More and more giant skeletons were found in various mound sites all over the United States. One, in West Virginia, a 7-foot-2-inch tall skeleton. Another, in Miamisburg, Ohio, which was a skeleton of 8 feet and 1.5 inches in height. Then one in Iowa, measuring 7 feet and 6 inches.
Most of us would never believe something that conspiratorial, would we? That would be too fantastical. Why do these governments also hide the skeletal remains of giants? Genesis 6 tells us where the giants came from. Now it happened when men began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and desirable, and they took wives for themselves whomever they chose and desired. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not strive and remain with man forever, because he is indeed flesh, sinful, corrupt, given over to sensual appetites. Nevertheless, his days shall yet be 120 years. There were Nephilim, men of stature, notorious men on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God lived with the daughters of men, and they gave birth to their children. These were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown, great reputation, fame." And I want to make something clear here, and you can only find this in the book of Enoch. which is very critical because Enoch is the one who tells us very clearly in great detail about where evil spirits came from, the demons. I heard one preacher say the other day, and other than this, he was great. He was right on with everything else he said. But he was wrong in the fact that demons don't come from fallen angels. They come from the Nephilim, the children that were begotten through women and fallen angels. So in a way, he's kind of right. But it's very clear in the book of Enoch that the demons or evil spirits will come from the dead Nephilim. Their spirits, when they die, stay on earth. And they're the ones that plague mankind. Now, in the book of Enoch, it says in their 6th chapter as well, kind of ironic, and it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, let's go choose wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of a great sin. I want to jump in right here and make this point. Do you understand that the angels knew exactly that what they were doing was a great sin against God? They knew, like the Bible tells us, that their first estate was heaven. They were never to leave there and go down to earth to impregnate earthly women. And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations. Mutual imprecations. What they were saying is that they would curse. They would make a curse that would go on any of the other angels who did not agree with what Semjaza said. In other words, he was telling them, I'm not going to go down there and do this and take the fall for you guys unless you will agree to make an oath with me that you're all part of it. And so they made an imprecation, which is literally a curse against themselves if they didn't keep their word. So they made this curse against each other, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then they swore all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of their leaders. And I'm not going to read it, but you can see all of the names of these different leaders of these angels. These are their chiefs of tens. So we see that the Bible account and the book of Enoch are saying the same thing. So I think it's solid ground to say where the giants came from. Giants came from the sexual intercourse of angels who left their first estate, and the angels who did not keep their own designated place of power, but abandoned their proper dwelling place. These, God, has kept in eternal chains under the thick gloom of utter darkness for the judgment of the great day. The other thing you need to understand is that these 200 angels, they're the ones who are in hell in chains right now. They are literally bound with chains, whatever size chain that is to bind an angel. So there's 200 of them in hell right now, being held there. And they've been there for a long time. But that does not include the whole 1/3 of the angels that listened to Satan and believed him. So not all of the angels are in hell right now. The devil wants to hide this to keep people in the dark about what he'll try and convince them of in the end times. In the meantime, he wants you to never make Jesus the Lord of your life. So if you die before making that choice, you'll be lost forever and suffer eternal punishment because you rejected the love of the truth. You don't need to. If you'd like to know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, I leave a link in the description box below. Go down there in that box where you'll find a link that'll take you to a page where it has a simple prayer. If you don't know what to say or how to pray, it's very simple. You can pray that prayer, and if you mean it in your heart, sincerely, you will be saved. Think about it.